Hi, everybody. Welcome to this special edition of the Dr. Keith Darrow podcast. Today, I am honored to have with us Tom O'Neill, the president and CEO of Cognivue. Did I get your title right, Tom?
You did.
Okay, great. So, Tom, thank you so much for being here today. I know that our audience, not only from a clinical side, but even from just a personal side, people want to know more about Cognivue and the role that it plays when it comes to screening for cognitive decline. Look, it's everywhere now, which is a great thing. It's been on TV lately. It's in the news. Finally, I feel like people are waking up to the concept that dementia, all forms of dementia, are truly the greatest neurocognitive disease of our time. And it's something that we have to address. Rates are going to triple in the next 20 to 30 years. There's so many risk factors, so much we know. And like all medical conditions, and I've always preached this, Tom, it's important to catch it early and treat it early. And with Cognivue, we have that ability when it comes to early screening for cognitive decline. So, Tom, thank you so much for being here. Tell the listeners a little bit about you. I always start with, Tom, what's your why? What gets you out of bed every day and get you motivated?
No, I appreciate that. So first off, thanks for the introduction and your outline of the, testing for cognitive impairment or mild cognitive impairment, and the earlier testing drives or leads to earlier intervention and better outcomes. You just pitched the whole. You communicated the entire Cognivue pitch all within a couple of minutes. So thank you for that. Great job. So myself, I've been in healthcare for 30 years. So I'm a bit of I call it a tweener. And what I mean by that is I didn't grow up in any one segment. I started in consumer healthcare with J&J, moved to pharmaceuticals, stayed at pharmaceuticals for a little while, then went to vision care and running Bausch & Lomb and North America Vision Care there. Left vision care, went to do large capital equipment in the diagnostic industry with orthoclinical diagnostics around chemistry, immunohematology. Left and then went to run the global Hologic women's health surgical business for a while, and then left to go to QIAGEN, which is a molecular diagnostics life sciences company.
So I have to, what I heard you say, because there was a lot of big words, was in a lot of big, powerful positions at a lot of companies that I sure I've heard of, and I know a lot of our listeners have, but it sounds like a lifetime in medical technology.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaways. Before I came to Cognivue, to me, it is about bringing great technology to bear for the benefit of our customers, the doctors, but clinicians, but also for their patients. And so that's always been a passion. So you asked about what drives me, what do I wake up really getting excited about, and it is that. And here at Cognivue, we're just a small startup. I've been here for 4 years. We started off as me and 3 other people 4 years ago. We're right around 55 and going strong, and we're more than doubling our business every year. So good things are happening. So it is about, I think, when you take care of your people, they take care of your customers, and ultimately their customers the docs take care of the patients. For me, it's also about building something great, and being able to develop an organization and a culture that is driven by innovation, technology, performance, and working with good people, like-minded people. That doesn't mean everybody agrees all the time. It means we leverage, because I don't want that. Leverage the collective IQ of the team to become better. And so we challenge each other. And hopefully because of that, we do continue to strive and grow as we.
So that's excellent. So I think people are starting to understand, right, a little bit of the why of Cognivue.
Yeah.
We're involved in implementing early detection through computerized screening of cognitive impairment, which is excellent. So we have a little bit of the why, your why. If you had to summarize what is Cognivue, right? We're maybe 3 to 5 minutes in, and maybe we're not at the meat and potatoes yet.
Yeah.
For the newcomers to Cognivue, what is Cognivue?
Yeah, so Cognivue is a company, and the technology is, so the company's named Cognivue, the technology is named Cognivue. We have Cognivue Clarity and Cognivue Thrive. Clarity is a 10-minute computerized assessment of cognitive function. Cognivue Thrive is a 5-minute screening of cognitive function. And really, if you want to think about it, we're as much a medical device company as we are a software company, because it is the software that is housed on that device, that algorithm, that adaptive psychophysics that we utilize. That's where the difference is. And we have 18 patents on both our device and our algorithm.
So is it fair to say that Cognivue is really a neurotechnology company?
Yeah, it is. And so and then you didn't ask, but let me share something.
No, go ahead, please.
Your perspective. So when we started 4 years ago, we were focused primarily in primary care, and then we shifted to neurology and psych. Neurology and psych get it. It makes sense to them. They do cognitive testing all the time now. Primary care struggles with it a little bit, and primary care struggles with it a little bit because patient flow challenges, reimbursement challenges, and then also there's no clear intervention. There's not a prescription. There's not something, but we do know, as you mentioned, there's modifiable risk factors, right, that can be managed. And so, we shifted and we launched a new device in Cognivue Thrive, and really wanted to what we call broaden the screening class. So rather than this all living on just in the primary care, neuro and psych world, we started talking to audiology, optometry, retail pharmacy, and even employer wellness. And that's where we saw tremendous growth and expansion. So that's, if you want to think about who we are, but then also how I think we really focused on the provider and the patient, which was what our focus was, to broaden that screening class and bring cognitive screening to the market. Keith, we test for everything in healthcare, everything except for brain health on any consistent basis.
It's wild. It's such, and you hit so many points there. We seem to ignore brain health. Study that came out, and I know you know it. It was actually reported in the Boston Globe a few years ago that nearly 50% of people walking around with known cognitive impairment, the doctor knows it, but the patient doesn't know it. And you hit the nail on the head, which is when those doctors were asked, why would you not tell your patient this? Because there's nothing that can be done about it. I can't write a script for it. And
I'll even take it a step further, because when you talk to the doctors, and I got a lot of great friends who are family practice and internal medicine, they're awesome docs. But sometimes here's the challenge: is their initial thought is, well, I already counsel my patients to eat better and exercise. And I try to make the analogy, while I appreciate that, I use the cholesterol analogy, and I'm like, well, I didn't start taking my cholesterol med, my Lipitor, until I saw a report that said my cholesterol is high. I think there's an inflection point that when you take a Cognivue Clarity or Cognivue Thrive and you get your report, there's an inflection point there. There's a data point that says, I got to do something, and this could be that driving force to get that patient to actually start to think about diet, exercise, lifestyle, mindfulness, hearing, vision, all these other things that could impact cognitive function.
So I know a little bit about my story when it comes to interacting with Cognivue. I found a flyer of some sorts. I wish I probably trashed it a couple of years ago, but it just came across my desk.
Yep.
And not because I was in hearing healthcare. I think somebody just saw it somewhere, gave it to me and said, this is interesting. And I thought, this is revolutionary, because, and the study had just come out. So it was right around 2017, 2018. So the Lancet report came out.
Yep.
indicating that between 30 and 40% of cases of dementia are considered preventable.
Right.
And when it comes to preventing, they didn't just throw out a bunch of things like you said, and a lot of doctors still do this, which is, just eat better, watch your cholesterol. I mean, yes, of course there are some common sense things that we can do to stay healthy, but there is now a known list. I kind of think of them as the 12 commandments when it comes to cognitive health. And at the top, number one is the early treatment of hearing loss and protecting your hearing as being so important, the most important way to reduce the risk of dementia. So it's not just that people can prevent it. Here's actually the things that you can do. And so it made perfect sense to me. And I've loved watching, sitting back on the sidelines, I've loved watching Cognivue go deep into audiology. We know that treating visual impairment reduces the risk of cognitive decline. And so now you see Cognivue popping up there, and diabetes care, and all these places that if we know modifying that lifestyle, modifying that activity, whether it be treating hearing loss, exercising more, Cognivue should be there so that people have a readout of where they are today. They can monitor it long term. There are things, I know you've seen it, where you can improve your cognitive function. You can actually see your score increase as you start to change your lifestyle factors. It's incredible to watch the growth. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. I think the other thing, and I'm sure we'll get into it at some point in the conversation, but it's an even bigger issue now. Beyond the stuff that you talked about, we know that COVID and some of the influences impact from COVID, you hear about the long haulers. Beyond that, the things that we talked about, the risk factors, right? Diet, exercise, lifestyle. Well, all of a sudden you had people under quarantine, lack of social interaction. You had gyms closed for the better part of a year and a half. So lack of exercise. You walk into any grocery store in those first 6 to 9 months of COVID, and everything was bare, especially the bakery aisle, right? So we weren't necessarily eating and exercising and didn't have that social interaction that we needed. And then on top of it, you couldn't watch TV without either the political, stress and anxiety that was going on TV every day, or the stress and anxiety that came from COVID. So those were the two primary topics for the better part of the first year of COVID, which lends itself to stress and anxiety, which causes some challenges too. So I think it's even bigger than just the massive. You had mentioned dementia and Alzheimer's, and I want to be clear, we're not a diagnostic tool for dementia and Alzheimer's. Only a doctor can diagnose that. Of course. But we're an assessment tool for doctors to be able to identify mild cognitive impairment. But in addition, which increases, once diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, your risk of continuing on to some form of dementia significantly increases. So yes, that is the correlation there. That's the path. And that dementia and Alzheimer's isn't just a healthcare issue. That's a society issue. That is something that every single one of your listeners, I guarantee you, if they're not directly impacted by it, they know somebody that is. Now you exasperate even further, because now it gets to be, everybody that was affected by COVID, right? Whether they had COVID or not, there are challenges that come with that, which I think we're going to be feeling for years to come. I think I love how you harken back to COVID. It's something that we're not out of. And even once we are, and I don't know what that looks like, right. We'll certainly never forget it. And we have to learn from these things. And I've been talking to my kids about it, my students about it, my colleagues about it. What are the silver linings? Lots of bad things. Yes. But what are some of the silver linings? And to me, and we've discussed this before, one of the biggest silver linings is it seems as though every American now understands these two words, risk factors. Agreed. Right? Because that's what it was. It was if you're a certain age, a certain weight, if you have certain medical conditions, your risk for being hospitalized, death due to COVID increase. And so now people are thinking differently about their health, about their risk factors for certain disorders. And we know
that there are major risk factors when it comes to increasing the risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, 100% agree. So that is one of those things that we had talked about. We're actually doing a study right now with University Hospital and USC. We're going to have about 600 patients that were either diagnosed with COVID or didn't have COVID, and we want to test what their cognitive function is, and those that were diagnosed with it or that didn't have it, and then look at some longitudinal data over time too. So I think there's a definite component to that. I think when you talk about those risk factors and the fact that people are much more aware of it, the good news is it is becoming part of the norm for people to hear on the radio or on TV and on podcasts to better understand how those risk factors affect not every part of their health, but really more specifically around cognition and brain health. And I do believe that it makes it more reasonable, if you will, for people to start talking about it and ask about it. I would actually make an argument that even before COVID, because we were doing, I'll give you a quick story aside, but
please,
we were doing, the employee health fairs. So I don't know if you've been to these employee health fairs, but big corporations, smaller groups, we would go to them and we would have 4 devices set up, and we would usually those health fairs are 3 to 4 hours long. And you get 20 tables set up in a cafeteria, and every little vendor has something going on, biometric screening and all kinds of
blood pressure, eyes, ears, right? And
we'd have Cognivue there. What was interesting to me, and we did 50 of them before COVID hit, 50 of these health fairs, and I'm talking Samsung, big, huge corporations, waste management, but also smaller, car dealership groups, different health systems. We do it for their employees. Every single one, not some, every single one, we had to stay an extra 1.5 hours to 2 hours longer and had a waiting list. And we had 4 devices running the entire time. But here's what was interesting is every single one, we'd meet with the HR person. They're like, we're not really sure our people are going to want to do this. And we're like, promise, we'll prove to you that there's an interest level. And what it drives to, Keith, is that there's a high level of awareness of dementia and Alzheimer's, and we call many people the worried well. And what I mean by that is they have a mom, a dad, a grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, somebody that they saw have dementia and Alzheimer's. So now they just intuitively think, even if they're 30, 35, 40 years old, they're like, I might have that, right? And they automatically then start thinking, I lost my keys, or I forgot why I walked in a room, so I might have something. So they wanted to get the screening just to be informed. And I think it was the aha moment for many of those employers that, and I'll talk about it in the bigger umbrella of mental health, but they looked at it and said, where does cognitive testing fit into their overall employee wellness programs? And it became a much bigger conversation. And then obviously COVID hit and some things changed, but we do see that coming back around once everybody gets, kind of back into whatever the new norm is, to your point.
Yeah. Well, and I love that concept of the worried well, right? Mm-hmm. And I love you talking about the, look, misplacing your car keys,
right?
You're okay.
Yeah,
not some drawer. Like in the holiday rush, come early December, if you go to the mall and you come out, you're not exactly sure where you parked your car.
Yep.
That's okay too. Happens to me a lot at the university.
Sure.
Because, I'm always fighting for parking spots. But when it comes to, I try to explain this to patients, when it comes to holding a pair of keys and maybe not remembering exactly what we're supposed to do with them. Or you get in the car and you instinctively drive to the house you grew up in, but not the house you moved in the last 5 years. Those are where we need to start being concerned.
Yep.
Those are the red flags of normal forgetfulness,
Yep.
normal stress, anxiety of life, just kind of, getting in the way. But that's when it becomes to the point where, you talk about mild cognitive impairment, you talk about dementia. We're talking about cognitive deficits that are significant enough to interfere with daily life.
Yeah.
And catching it early through a screening just to see where you are is so vital to being able to really plan out and live out your absolute best life.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important that I want to reiterate is this, and it is important to have a technology that's sensitive enough to catch it when there's small, subtle changes, and not when they become big changes that may not be things that you can then reverse, right? So and I think this, I think we've talked about this, but our technology, it's an all-in-one device, is it literally captures data every 83 milliseconds. So in our 5-minute Thrive test, it's 78,000 data points. And then when our 10 minutes, 130,000 data points. And the algorithm itself is adapting to that individual's abilities throughout the entire assessment or screening, and capturing that data. And so we can still capture it while it is mild cognitive impairment before it becomes a motor skill issue. That's critical, right? The sooner you can catch it, and the better you can intervene, and the better the outcomes. And I know I keep saying it, but that's the crux of what we're trying to do, and why we're trying to broaden the screening class is to intervene, to help doctors and clinicians intervene and have better outcomes for patients.
Now let me ask you, because when people think of a memory test, they think I think the vast majority of people, if they've ever been through it, it's stack some blocks.
Sure.
I'm going to read you a list of words, and then I need you to repeat them in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe it's draw a clock, right? A lot of these, what I consider more subjective tests, although there's certainly been data for the mini mental state, the mini cog. There's a number of other tests out there. Why is Cognivue different? And please take this opportunity to tell people why it's better. Those are my words. I said it. I believe it's better, but tell us why it's different than, say, a traditional paper-based test.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of my perspective on it. I think, first of all, the MMSE and the MoCA, there's real good value in those, and they've been around for 30 or 40 years. So I get that, and I get the value of what doctors are comfortable using, and that those are what they've been using. But if you think about them, they're question and answers, right? And each one of the questions does not interact or interface with another question. It just, you evaluate. It's administered by a clinician, right? It's tested or scored by the clinician, and there's no interaction between the subtests, right, or all the sub questions, and their question and answer. Ours, I want to give you a little bit of a background on ours. Ours is no question and answer. We'll use Cognivue Clarity. It's 10 exercises in 10 minutes. We have an intro video to Cognivue Clarity, and we have a separate intro video for Cognivue Thrive, the screening, the 5-minute screening. And the reason why we have that, just to start off, is on the paper and pencil test, like the mini mental status exam, MMSE or MoCA, no matter if you're trained or not, every single person is going to introduce it a different way. Then there's human variability, human error, and bias that goes into that. There just is. No matter how good you are, if you have 10 people in your practice and every one of them are introducing it to a different patient, they all have their own nuance in how they do it. That lends itself to variability. Ours, all you have to do is sit that patient down, and they all get the same introduction to the assessment or to the screening themselves. So that's the start, to try to remove some of that human error, variability, and bias. Then our first two subtests do not go into the overall score. what they do is we test your motor ability and we test your visual salience. We test your motor ability because we know a 15-year-old student athlete who may be taking a Cognivue before a football season or before soccer is going to have different motor ability than say a 35-year-old with MS or a 77-year-old with either heavy arthritis or Parkinson's or something else. So we test their motor ability purposefully, and that adapts the rest of the subtest to their motor capabilities. Then we test their visual salience, and again, then adjust the rest of the subtest to their visual salience. The reason being is we don't want to test their motor skills and visual salience. We want to test their cognition. So as much as we can take that off the table, but then each one of the subtests, and we go through, the memory and the things like memory, executive function, visual, spatial. We go through all those subtests, and each one is informing the next subtest so that we're finding a patient's individual threshold with each one of the subtests. Okay. Mm-hmm. And ultimately at the end, getting the report that shows individual scores for an overall score and clarity, but then individual scores for the domains, as well as a couple of performance measures around processing speed and reaction time. And that's where kind of the magic comes into place, because a lot of people go, hey, why don't you just make it an app and just throw it on an iPad or on an iPhone? And if you recall the first two tests that I talked about, which was motor skills and visual salience, I'll go back to that. If I put it on an app, right, and it's on an iPad, having somebody that's a 15-year-old student athlete manage that, probably not a problem holding it and moving it. 35-year-old with MS may be different. And certainly if you ask my parents to do it, even if it was in a stand, they would have difficulty. And when you're measuring it every 83 milliseconds, speed matters, right? Yeah. Time to answer matters. And same with the visual acuity. And we have a Cognivue cover that comes like with the device. So when you open it up, the cover unfolds and opens up. That keeps out ambient light and focuses the patient. Again, different patients will not have, some may not have a problem with glare, others may. And if you're just sitting there trying to like get a better look at the screen, and we're measuring every 83 milliseconds, it's gonna change how you do.
So let me ask you though. I understand. I've been using the equipment for years.
Sure.
But when I listen to you from my science side, my clinical side, it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
If I put myself in the patient's shoes, it sounds very complicated.
Yep.
And it sounds like, you know what? I'd rather you just ask me questions and see if I can remember them.
So let me hit on that really quick, because we do a lot of
because I think what we're missing here, Tom, is yes, it's because we've used the word computer.
Yep.
And there are 60-year-olds or 80-year-olds that are like, I don't own a computer. I don't own a cell phone.
Yep.
Just ask me questions and see if I can remember them, because I can't do this. But you and I know that's not true.
Sure. So we do a lot of patient satisfaction surveys. So after a patient comes out, we'll have a survey for them to take. We get high scores in every element of our test. So what did they think of it? All 94 and above scores. Would they take it again? All 94 and above scores. Would they recommend it to a friend? All 94 and above scores. Okay, out of 100. And when we just ask them to give us their perspective, they say it feels like it's an arcade game. So they many of them have been through the slums, the MOCA, the MIDI mental status exam. And what they don't like about that is that feels degrading to them. And so they have somebody watching over them while they're taking it, because somebody's watching you. They're evaluating your ability to answer that question, draw that clock, make the difference between a giraffe and an elephant, do those things. And so what the feedback has been for us when they come out of those is they actually feel degraded and they don't feel good about themselves. When they come out of ours, they'll say, yeah, it felt difficult, but remember, it felt difficult because we're finding individual thresholds. And so if you do well, it gets harder. If you don't do as well, it doesn't push you to that point. It finds your threshold. So I hear what you're saying. I honestly probably could have done a better job explaining some of the simplicity of it. But when it's self-administered, and it's exercises and not questions, and nobody's in the room watching over you, it's a very different experience and a very positive experience for those patients.
It really is. I've been through the questionnaires with patients, and the stress of, oh my God, I don't know if I can remember that. And then how does that stress on that question impact the next question? I mean, there's a lot of issues when it comes to the confidence and the reliability of your traditional paper-based. Yes, they've been around for 30, 40 years. Yes, they are valid, but there are still some questions, whereas this test really is simple. And what I'm going to do, there will be not only a picture, because this will be on YouTube, there'll be a picture that pops up, and I'm going to have a link to a video that shows people how simple it really is, because this could be a little too abstract of a conversation. And then, because I know you have some simple 1-minute tutorial type video, so people can really see the simplicity and how it yet it is so simple to do. It's a simple little joystick, but every 83 seconds it's adapting. You genuinely don't know, right? You're focused on task. You're not worried, did I do it right? This, that, I feel like somebody's watching me. So many of those variables are taken out of it. I mean, we have, I'm sure you know the numbers. Our clinics outside of your research center in Rochester, my clinics, I'm proud to say it, we are the highest users of Cognivue. And I can tell you, definitely subjective data, but we certainly have a 95 to 100% satisfaction rating with our patients in terms of ease. Would I do it again? Would I refer a friend? So absolutely, it is beautiful, simple technology that is incredibly, incredibly powerful. So just a couple more questions before we go. I have a note here. We had a conversation, and I said to myself, I got to ask him this when we meet again. Tell me more about June 6th. That was a date you brought up the last time we talked, not January 6th. I'm not going political. We're not talking about the insurrection or whatever word, but June 6th. Tell me about that date, because I have this and I'm just not remembering what we said about it.
Yeah. So June 6th was in my mind a day that really changed the healthcare landscape as it relates to dementia and Alzheimer's. June 6th, if you recall, is the date that the FDA approved Biogen's drug.
Yes.
Aduhelm.
Yes, the new drug for Alzheimer's, correct.
Yep. Now, there's a lot of controversy around the drug itself, but set that aside for a second. I'm not going to.
Let's not go there.
Because I'm not an expert and I'm not a clinician or physician. I'm not going to talk about that. But what it did, and I really applaud Biogen for this, because it's always tough to be the first, right? And they're the first, and they got to push through. But what it did is it woke up the world, and I'll speak to the U.S. in particular. But it woke up the U.S. to say, you had payers, the insurance companies going, oh my God, what are we going to do? This is a $54,000 a year drug. How are we going to cover this? This could completely crush us. You had health systems like figure out, how do we screen? How do we figure out who the right patients are? You had providers who were like, how do we even fit this in? And then you had patients, every single one of them wanting it. Right. So what it did, it really kind of shook up everybody to go, we're not ready. Like, the health system is not ready. And we do talk a lot about, and it for good reasons, the pandemic, COVID, the pandemic. And once something is identified as a pandemic, you see all the doors open up, whether it's political, whether it's funding and financial, whatever, services, resources, like it's just a mobilization, right? Well, I would actually argue that dementia and Alzheimer's and cognitive impairment is 100 times bigger than any kind of COVID pandemic, and the influence is significantly more impactful. And if there was some way to get that kind of a designation, then I think you'd see tremendous resources being put against this. But that aside, that's what happened on June 6th that I think really woke up many in healthcare, across healthcare, specifically to start realizing we gotta figure out how to get through all the patients that are going to be interested in, and how do we get it through, how do we process these patients through the system.
I love what you're saying, because it really is another silver lining of COVID, is to realize how inept, not a political statement, how inept our medical system is at dealing with a lot of people getting sick at once.
Yep.
And forget all the other disorders and diseases on the planet. If you just look at dementia and the rates tripling in the next 20 to 30 years, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the hospital beds, we don't have the assisted living set, we don't have the ability to handle it.
You know what's so difficult is in large metropolitan areas, there are resources there, but we're talking around the globe. And if you think of other countries that don't have the resources, but even in the US, there are so many people and caregivers dealing with this in their own homes because they don't have other resources. And there's a whole nother level of stress and anxiety and work issues and employment issues that come with being a caregiver of somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's. So there's a lot to do. I'm on the steering committee for the Milken Institute on improving dementia care. So I know there are groups, and really amazing groups like Milken and like the Global Alzheimer's Platform, really trying to do and change things. And we love being a part of that. But it can't happen fast enough.
It can't. And I'll leave it with this, right? Dementia's here. I don't necessarily see a cure because there's many types of dementia. So the reality is what the data tells us. There are millions of people and millions more that will be diagnosed with dementia.
Yep.
But today, what we know is that 40% of those cases could be prevented.
Yep.
And so I say to my patients, I have a poster hanging up in my clinical office that says, you would do anything to prevent dementia, but are you doing everything to prevent dementia? And so I love what Cognivue is doing. I love the mission that you have, the tool that you are providing to clinicians like me around the globe to be able to better inform our patients and have the conversation of, these are the lifestyle factors that you can change today to reduce your risk. This is your score of cognitive function in these 5 different realms today. We're going to monitor this. We're going to change our lifestyle factors and monitor the score as we go, because I know there's new data, and perhaps I'll have you back for another episode to talk about the data showing that something as simple as affordable as treating hearing loss improves cognitive function. We've known this for at least 5 years, and now we're getting hints that we could actually track this easily for our patients. If day one, here's the cognitive score, we start treating hearing loss, we can watch that improve over time with this incredibly powerful computerized screening tool that you've developed.
So Keith, first of all, thank you for everything you do and everything that your fellow clinicians and whether it's PhD, audiologists, MSs that are treating hearing loss. It makes a difference every day. And I believe really with all my heart that Cognivue brings a tool to the audiological practices that allows doctors to be doctors and to have a bigger conversation with their patients than just what's their hearing loss, but rather making that connection because there's a clear ear-brain connection. We hear with our ears, we listen with our brains, right? We interpret those sounds with our brains. When you, as a clinician, can then make that connection for the patients and start to have a bigger conversation about how improving their hearing can also improve their brain health, I think it becomes a much better, much bigger clinical conversation for you and your patient.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Tom, I don't know, I can't see it in the background there, but if you have your crystal ball with you somewhere on your desk, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like for Cognivue and cognitive screenings? What is your prediction? What do you think?
So my prediction is cognitive screening starts to become a part of normal healthcare,
mainstream healthcare.
Mainstream healthcare. And I'm talking on the MD side as well as on the clinician side. I think just as we test everything else, I think testing for cognition and brain health is going to become part of the mainstream. I think you'll see Cognivue leading the way in that. I also don't think it's a Cognivue and nothing else. I think this is such a massive, again, not just healthcare issue, society issue, that there are going to be many players in the cognitive testing space. We have focused our attention on the provider and on the patient. So that's where we spent the majority of the last 4 years. And our company has been around for 15 as we work through the FDA clearance process and all the other work that we've done to get to this point. But in 3 to 5 years, I see us having a significant impact across neuro, psych, primary care, but also optometry, audiology, retail pharmacy, employer wellness. And we're already working on versions 5, 6, and 7, and what those next iterations of our technology need to be, so that we're continually staying ahead of the game. And also, I think there's a big element here of the data collection and how we can use the data with you, the clinicians, with the health systems, with the employers, and with the medical device or healthcare companies to continually bring great new interventions and help them bring great new interventions to market, all for the benefit of the patient.
Tom, I am honored to consider you a colleague. I am honored that you came on this show. All the work that you and your team are doing, I'm learning so much, even just from this conversation. Just the fact that you've been your company's been at this now for 15 years, and we really are just starting to scratch the surface.
Yep.
And I really do look forward to being on the journey with you as we continue to, we've scratched the surface, but now it's time to dive a mile deep and to really, hone in on how do we get everybody from the medical side, from the layperson side, to understand the importance of cognitive health. Tom, thank you for all you do. I appreciate you being here. I have to ask you now a very personal question, so I can get to know a little bit more about you deeper. What's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie?
Yep.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'll tell you
I know it could depend on the day. It could depend on the mood, but you got one movie left to watch. What are you going to go to?
So I will tell you what I like movies, but I will tell you that in the last, call it 6 to 8, 10 years, I think TV, all the different services actually have better.
That's fine.
So I'm going to actually take it to a different place. I'm going to say The Wire, which was a series. It was, I think, the first of the great, really well written series that now you see all there. I mean, there's a bunch of them, and we could go on for hours. But The Wire was the first one in my mind that kind of broke the mold for all the others to come forward. So that would be. It would be mine.
There you go. Thank you so much for sharing that personal tidbit. Tom, again, appreciate you being here today. Appreciate you and your ever-growing team at Cognivue. You're doing amazing things, and I'm just glad to be a small part of the journey.
Listen, Keith, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do every single day. You're following your team, and you continue to be an advocate for us, and I appreciate that. I look forward to getting together with you again and talking about our future as we continue to evolve and grow. And you're right. There's a lot of data coming at us in the next 12 months from the 15 or so different studies we're involved in. So I look forward to getting together with you again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom.
All right. Take care.
Take care.